It's 9 o'clock, and I'll call this special session of the Independent City Commission to order. Today, we have two items. Item for City Commission action is consider ballot language for renewing special use sales tax. Commissioners, you received the draft with the packet. Kelly took our recommendations and composed a format for us to look at. Have each of you reviewed the proposal?
I have.
Okay. So we're ready for discussion?
I am.
Okay. We left the percentages blank for now. We're focusing in on the wording at this time. So, Commissioner Ususi, do you have any questions, anything you want to bring up about the?
Yes, I do. I've had a chance to go through that. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this open up on my tablet, and
Okay.
it's not cooperating right now.
Okay, Commissioner Hayes?
Start. Yes, thank you.
There we go.
My suggestions for improvement for the language in this current proposal is on item B, equipment, building, and facility improvements. I would like to strike from that language Mount Hope Cemetery Wall, as that is referring to maintenance of an existing in-place structure, and I think that confuses me a little bit. On item C, I would like to move the reference to safe and accessible multimodal routes to the first item instead of the last item, because it directly references and is more directly aligned with the improvements to streets. I would also, on item D, like to remove language that refers to streets, as that is confusing, as it looks like a duplication of the reference to streets in item C. So downtown streetscape and aesthetics, I would like to see that removed, and construction of new streets to schools, industries, and healthcare would strike that from that language. Now I'd like to return to the phrase in item C where it says safe and accessible multimodal routes to schools, industry, healthcare, retail, and recreation. And I would like to simplify that by saying strike the word industry and strike the word retail, and say the following: multimodal routes to schools, comma, healthcare, comma, recreation, comma, and business, period. Those are my suggestions with regard to the language. Did you get all of that?
I'll have to get on the replay. My computer was not cooperating with me completely here.
Well, we have a permanent video record to help us
Yes,
with
and
that.
I'll replay that and I'll capture all that.
Okay. Commissioner Ususi, do you have yours?
Yes, starting on item D, I would like the phrase incentives for business retention and recruitment. I would like that be the first sentence on that. because that was the driving force for economic development initiative. So I think that should come up to the first statement on that. And then I'm in agreement with the Mount Hope Cemetery wall on B. And then Dean's already addressed the one about the accessible multimodal routes to schools, industry, healthcare, and recreation. And then my others is we'll get into when we talk about percentages.
Do what?
My other comments will be when we get into percentages that we were
Okay.
allocating. Sorry, my voice is going.
And I have input on percentages as well when we reach that point.
Okay. Okay. What I question on item B and item D, the city technology and communications infrastructure and the expanded community broadband access, those kind of appear to me to be the same thing.
I think that the difference was community broadband access was like for access to the community for like if they have these, we're able to have higher speeds of internet to the community to allow businesses to have remote workers and things like that, where the other was related to technology for city operations. So I saw those as two different things.
Okay, city is not city limits, but city is within the city.
Yeah, like the
structure
city
itself.
operations, where the community broadband access is increasing our broadband for the community at large.
Okay. Am I the only one reading city as city limits, not city business?
Actually, I have had to teach myself to say city when I mean the government and community when I mean not the government or non-government. So it is still, I think, problematic language for lots of people because when they think of the city, they think of the community at large. So what is the word that is clear that it is
Facility technology and communications infrastructure, would that? Clarify it at all? City facilities, technology?
Or city operation technology?
Yeah, that would be good too. You want city operations,
Yeah.
technology and communications infrastructure?
I'm thinking. We use the word public several times in this. Public safety, public works. But that doesn't really transfer to public technology, does it?
No, that switches back to the city in that case.
City operations. Yeah, I think city operations is an improvement.
Or city operational.
City operational?
Or government
Or you could say
operational.
city of independence. I guess I'm still struggling with my own, uncertainty at this time of what plays well in the public vernacular. So,
Yeah, I think the citizen would tend to look at total and not governmental.
What if you use the term internal operations instead of, and take city out, if city's the piece that is confusing, just say internal operations.
You could, or you could,
Or
what
governmental
Leonard just said
operations.
was city government, which would direct the attention back to this is for the city government. So what you said was in city internal technology or city government technology. I would say either one of those, whatever your preference is.
Yeah.
I think government would probably be more clear.
Yep. City government, technology, and communications infrastructure.
City government technology and communications infrastructure. I think that's quite clear.
Okay. And on item D, the bowling alley and skating rink, those being specific, I know they've been identified, but both of them have also proven not to be able to be supported by the community too. If we want to, we've got initiatives for new recreational facilities. Is that sufficient? And just strike the such as bowling alley and skating rink.
And Senior Citizen Center was part of that.
Do what?
The Senior Citizen Center was part of the such as. You want to
Okay.
strike all of them?
No,
Actually, I think the Senior Citizen Center could stand alone as
That's-
something different from a recreational facility.
That's how I read it with the and, it wasn't including the
okay.
two before.
I'll put a semicolon there.
But I didn't read the punctuation. I read because the Citizen Center provides more support potentially than just recreation.
Yeah, if you just, I think it's still instructive if you say initiatives for new recreational facilities, semicolon, Senior Citizen Center, semicolon.
Yeah, that's what I'll do.
Then tourism initiatives. The transient guest tax is kind of supporting a lot of the tourism. Maybe clarify that we don't want to project the idea that we're going to supplement the transient guest tax, but how would the special use sales tax be used for tourism?
I put all the items in there that we had up on the board that had points in the order of the points that they see.
Yeah.
So the ones that are listed first had the highest points, and that's basically what I did. So that was in that brainstorming session. That's where that came from.
So then would anyone be opposed to dropping the tourism initiative and consider it with the transient guest tax? But our economic development monies would be used as incentives to address the issues of tourism. Not directly related, but if there was tourism is such a broad term. But
Yeah, I think that that might be confusing to certain people in the city to include tourism initiatives within this as one of the focuses.
so can we strike that?
I'm going to say it's okay
Okay.
with me.
I'm good also.
Okay.
Remove that.
I think that's the only thing that I had. Now, as we go to percentages, this might come up more after we're done with our budget. One of the things, the first one, item A, mill levy support and debt repayment. We need the information from Lacey on what our bond will be, and then I think we've talked through various meetings with some of the KDOT projects that we're getting to look at. If we have a bond for that, we would need to include it, and also then the amount that we need for mill levy support. I don't remember if I heard when the initial special use sales tax was enacted, it was just kind of there, this block of money. But looking at some issues we're having with valuation and rising costs, do we need to look at a given figure that we need to propose each year for mill levy relief? So it might make it easier to budget as values change if we say, okay, this much is how much we're going to structure for bond and interest, and then here's the mill levy that we can count on close to in our special use sales tax.
The issue I see with that is that since this number is an ever-changing number and a projection, it could actually prove to be harder to budget that way. Just because unless the number is low enough that we will for sure, reach that amount. So both methods have pros and cons.
Yeah, and I was thinking not that it would take all, but supplement so that it would take some spikes out. If we're going to use it for mill levy relief, then is it 100,000 that we can put in our budget, so at least we have that constant, and then the rest is in there? Or do we need 200? Do we need 150? Do we
Well, I can
need?
tell you what we're at right now is about 485,000. So I wouldn't suggest less than that, and that's the current 25%.
So that's what we could set our percentage based upon what you felt those numbers would be, and then include any. We've got two major street projects.
The benefit is so in the last few years, we have gone beyond our projections of sales tax revenue and collected more. That option of setting a dollar limit would prohibit you from ever using sales tax dollars to build up a cash balance in your general fund, because you would be limiting yourself to that, $500,000 or whatever, where if you over collected sales tax, we did better than we projected, none of those additional funds would go back to the general fund.
But in determining our percentage, if we knew roughly about what we're expecting in bond payments, and then how much, the 400 and whatever, not actually setting dollar amounts for this, but get a better idea of what we would need percentage-wise.
That's what I mean. Percentage is probably.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
I was just not talking that way.
Okay.
I meant we need to look at the dollars to determine how much percent that would be,
Okay.
not set that dollar amount.
Okay.
But look at how much money we figure we'll need to determine our percentage.
Okay.
So, it's like right now for me, it's like, 25%. That was easy because it was 4. But if we're starting to look at 30%, we're just grabbing a number out of the air, that if we knew about how much money you needed, then that could translate to a percentage of what we're expecting to get for the whole. And then it would know what we've got left for the others too. But
What also might help is if the language of the special use sales tax is such that capital items that have historically sometimes been budgeted out of the general fund are able to be budgeted straight out of the special use sales tax, that in a way it's a roundabout way of also supporting the general fund. If we can remove unnecessary expenses so that only true operational expenditures are budgeted through the general fund, that also provides a sort of mill levy support.
yeah, because I think the special use sales tax, I got some information on the Attorney General's opinion, and a special use sales tax has to be identified as special use. So one of the things we struggled with for so long was replacement of the ladder truck. And trying to get that money out of general fund, it was a significant amount that we almost went too far, that the truck was almost unserviceable. I remember, Sean, at times you said it was down for repairs and questioned repairs. So in this case, an item like our fire trucks, we're looking at big expenses, and they are critical to the operation. That this is what I'm hearing you say, that we could move those purchases in to the special use sales tax and identify those vehicles. That would give us some relief too. Yeah. So I guess for determination of A, I think we need you, Lacey, to get us some numbers and an idea of what that percentage would
For the
have to
general
be.
fund?
Huh?
For the general fund?
For
Or for bond and
item
interest?
percentage for A and the special use sales tax, for us to determine that amount, and not right now,
Okay. I
Yeah.
think,
maybe in about 5 minutes.
yeah.
No. Commissioners, you understand what
I believe I do.
Yeah,
So-
I do also.
but I thought that's our big key that lets us know what the total is to divide up in the others. And at our last commission meeting, Commissioner Hayes, you brought up a good point. Instead of grouping it into just two categories, but still retaining the three identities, that for longevity, a continuation of the future commissions, it would establish better direction for them to have the guidelines of what we're talking about. So,
Yeah, I still believe that's true. I think that's, the intent of the special use sales tax needs to be clear not only to us as commissioners, but also to the public, so that not only is the commission held accountable, but the public has the ability to hold the commission accountable, because they have clear direction, understand how it's going to be utilized.
and that one Attorney General's opinion, I think it was in 2008, it was clear on the intent of what a retail sales tax was intended to do, and what the special use sales tax was intended for. And we just got to follow true with that and make it clear. So,
Indeed.
but Commissioner Hayes, you had some.
Yeah, so perhaps just adding on to what you were talking about, as we were looking at the budget in review yesterday, I came to understand that a lot of the monies that we are collecting in the special use sales tax that are earmarked for streets are, in fact, at least at this current time, catching up to street repairs that we have already made and paid for by financing. So when we say that one of the percentages goes to mill levy support and debt repayment, and we also say that our streets and sidewalks improvement is going to the debt repayment specifically for streets and sidewalks, it is perhaps less clear that we're not really paying for tomorrow's streets, but we're paying for yesterday's streets. And perhaps as we figure these percentages out, we could understand how much of that percentage that's going to for improvements to streets and sidewalks is actually going to be available for next year and not paying for last year. That's why, as I initially saw, because I didn't understand that, when I initially saw a lowering of the percentage for streets and sidewalks and moving some of that monies to debt repayment, to debt, I didn't understand that. Mm-hmm. But now I do, because there is a fairly significant amount of the current special use sales tax for streets repaying debt. So as part of that language, or part of that understanding of what is actually, if we're going to say it's going for that, we either need to say within the language that it's going to pay for not only new streets, but debt on previously built streets, or we need to move some of that percentage to debt repayment so that we can be clear to the public and to future commissions that this portion of that money for streets is actually for now, for right now, for fixing the streets that are in disrepair today, as opposed to paying for, streets that we fixed last year or 10 years ago.
Dean, do you think it would be beneficial if I went ahead and go over this summary that we have previously gone over that has the special use sales tax debt summary?
Indeed, because this is what I'm referring to in terms of what I realized within the budget review, and that is how much of our current special use sales tax is going to pay for existing bonds on streets. So go ahead.
And for their benefit, what page is it on in your booklet?
It is 20, page 20 of the budget summary.
Well, for the new special use sales tax bond, those would be transferred into bond and debt repayment. They wouldn't stay in streets, would they?
No, which is what we currently do also. So the breakup, what I did on this is a schedule of our total bond and interest obligations currently. And this first table, the funding source summary, shows of the, let's see, what year is this? Of the 2020, $862,106 in bond and interest, where that comes from in terms of which fund sources the monies. So water and sewer has, just under 80,000. The education sales tax funds 304,000, and the remainder, the $478,094 comes from special use sales tax. And then, since that is the most complicated portion of it, I broke that down further into the next table, which is the special use sales tax summary. And the first two lines represent, ADA has a 0.25% or 25% of the 1% special use sales tax specifically allotted for ADA, and same for streets. So I the first two lines represent of the ADA and street monies received into special use sales tax, what dollar amount goes straight to debt repayment. And for ADA's percentage, $67,781 in 2020 goes specifically for an ADA bond. And then the same for streets, but that number is significantly higher. It's the $410,312.50. So then the bottom two lines of this table take the difference of the total 25% allocated to those buckets, less the bond obligations in each of those categories, and then it shows the remaining ADA dollars to be spent in the current year and the remaining street dollars to be spent in the current year. So as you can see, streets has such a high percentage of debt repayment that there's $73,437.50 remaining in that category to spend on current year projects. So just briefly looking at the numbers, you know, for the next couple years, we're right around, $480,000, which is about 25% of the special use sales tax.
Thank you.
And I will point out that it does jump up in 2021, and that shows in ADA, and I'll make a note to double check, but off of memory, I believe that's due to the refinancing. We saw a reduction in the first couple of years, but then the payment jumps up in year 3.
Okay.
I believe.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Commissioner Hayes, that you see that category and you think, well, that money's coming in, but it's like I went to payday loan, and even though I get my check today, I've already spent it, and I got to go pay someone else. So as the money comes in to streets, we've got to pay where we already spent it, which goes up to bonds. We can't do more streets in the future, and it'd be easier to explain, maybe. I'm looking for the words for the public to be able to understand when they see how much revenue is coming in to that category each year, that is for current streets, not streets we already did. So the way, I guess, at this point is we're looking at the percentage. I don't know if it's possible to project what projects for streets that we'd see in the future that we would bond and allow a bond payment to come out of that. 5 years, maybe we could. 10 years,
Well,
it'd take a lot of organization.
we are at pretty good timing for, we talked about needing to issue a bond for the Maple Street projects.
Right.
And this is a 10-year special use sales tax, so perhaps looking at what all we should include in that 10-year bond to be paid with this 10-year special use sales tax would be a good idea.
Kelly, you had visited with me about what was it called, street inventory or street study that...
The pavement quality index,
Yes, that was it.
that's where they come in and they study all your surfaces, and then they give you a plan of replacement on what needs, what the priorities are, and also if you could layer that with a traffic study, so you know which roads are used the most. And then it gives you a plan of streets over a long period of time, so you know which streets, not based on just driving around, oh yeah, this one looks bad. It's actual, they come in and study it and have actual data.
And when Kelly was explaining that to me, it seemed like you would actually have the data to chart out a road repair or replacement plan with fact that, where we're looking at over a 10-year time, you would be able to project the cost and set the priorities so you'd know the funding that is needed coming up. That's not a cheap study, but it sure seemed like a good investment for the community to give us a better picture of what we need to do in streets and roads.
It would be based on the actual, what quality is left in the road. So it would be more of a structure that we could follow rather than, it'd be more objective to follow that. And then we could determine, if it was, as an example, let's say they identified $8 million worth of improvements over the next 10 years, then that would give us some idea of what we would need to set aside dollar-wise per each year, and then work toward that 10-year plan to where these were all the roads that were improved over that 10-year plan, and this is the money we allocated for each year, and at least something along that line.
I think it'd be more specific that they would identify the streets, so not an amount, but the location. So,
And they tell you what needed to be done to that street, whether it just needed to be resurfaced, if it needed the mill and overlay, if it needed a different type of surface. There would be recommendations.
so the first thing would be the funding for that study, whether it hasn't been included in the 2021 budget, has it?
No, and I don't even know what that type of study would cost.
Yeah. So funding for a document like that, if we want to include in the language of the special use sales tax to allow specific studies or broaden the definition of streets, that it would include that, or whether, we want to look into the future budgeting years and actually budget it out of the general fund.
A study of that nature, I believe, is implicated or implicit in the idea that there's a project. And so if there is, in fact, if we're talking about new construction or new projects, we're also talking about new planning, new information development. And so as part of just the idea that we're going to do something new, I think the citizenry would understand that there's going to be a planning portion of it. There's going to be an investment in expertise and putting the process that we're going to use together before we just launch. So whether there needs to be language in the special use sales tax ballot language, I'm not sure. I don't really think there needs to be specific language that we're actually going to fund the engineering and development of plans for these projects.
And maybe that needs to come from the bond attorney that's going to prepare the language, that we keep that
Indeed.
flexibility.
Indeed. But I just to reinforce what's already been said, better information gives us the ability to make better plans. And the fact that we don't have this information to go on now, then means that we are using probably things like embedded expertise, people who have been around a long time, something that we used to call at work tribal knowledge, which is that it resides within the brains of the people who are present, but isn't on a document anywhere. It's not something that's easily transferable, but it's known within the collective group. This type of things is that type of knowledge is particularly at risk when you lose someone who is key to that understanding. So if that person or persons leave the organization, that information is just lost. So getting it down on paper or getting a clear-cut process so that anyone with a certain amount of training can follow the process and get the same results is imperative to our success. So whatever it costs, it's imperative to our success that we know, so that we can proceed with confidence and that we can begin to act responsibly in terms of maintenance and repairs.
Also, if you were able to do the comprehensive plan at the same time, you could have a traffic study done that is utilized for both documents and not have to do that at two different times and have that expense twice. Because that would be utilized for both documents.
And
Just wanted to throw that out there.
And it's awful hard to get this information in-house when we've downsized our staff that, they're busy trying to keep things repaired and going, and it's hard to find time to go back and track these areas and get the information put in to a report. So,
We do have a record of all the streets that we have done and when we have done them. We do have those. We have it on an old map, then going forward on the pictometry, I put all the new stuff on there. So we have that, but that doesn't tell us the condition of what's left.
right, so. Kelly, when you talk to the bond attorney, see how broad or specific we have to go in identifying that if studies relating to streets can be tied to the street portion of this percentage, or if studies have to come out of other funds, then we'll have to look in the future budget.
Well, I know when they did the quality of life projects, they did studies to determine what needed to be done, and I believe they funded those out of that quality of life. I mean, I would think it would be related, but I will ask that
Yeah,
question.
okay, great. Okay. So to determine percentage, do we need to allow Lacey and Kelly to get us some information and consider setting the percentages at our July 23rd meeting?
I think we need to talk new bond numbers prior to coming up with the final percentage.
Right.
So that might need to happen first.
Can you have that by the 23rd? That's our next meeting, isn't it?
Next Thursday.
We don't have a-
What's our deadline for the ballot language period?
Well, that's the thing. I would like to have it finalized what you guys want by the 23rd, so I can get it to bond council, because you have to adopt that resolution, and we gotta get it going in August, and we're running out of time.
Indeed. So precision may be less important than just a good understanding
Right.
of where the money's going to go from each of the percentages.
And once we have the language, even if we're still working on the percentages, I could go ahead and get it to them and get them started. So that and they can always put in different percentages.
Well, that's what I was,
That's my plan.
That's
just
what I was
because
thinking,
don't
that-
want this delayed.
the percentage, they don't care about the percentages.
No.
We need the language, so with what we've talked today, we can get that to the bond attorney
Right, and that's my
to get
plan.
the language, and then the 23rd, we could,
Plug in the percentages.
yeah. That's kind of sometimes I'm thinking and not saying what I thought, but yeah, I think we need to get it wrapped up at our next commission meeting. So, any further discussion?
No, I have no further changes to the language.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, great. Then with that, we will move on.
I would like to ask, since I did bring up the comprehensive plan, do you want to include that in any of this language? It is something the Planning Commission has asked for several years, and it is a 1982 plan.
I would check with the bond attorney too, because we've got the same issue with coming up with a significant amount of money for that comprehensive plan. We haven't had it. And if you can combine the two together, like you mentioned, it makes, since some of the data is overlapping, to find out and include it in it if it is. And
Okay,
that's
because
my,
it's not directly related to streets or sidewalks, so it would be a little bit out there. It's more related to planning and future development.
right. Well,
It'd be
it
under
could
the
affect-
economic development
that's right.
section.
could be economic, and we'll be looking at the development of the parks, okay?
I'm skeptical of the language because I'm not sure comprehensive plan really plays, if there's a public awareness of what that means. So it would take additional education, I think, to explain the comprehensive plan. So that's why I would suggest that the language be reviewed to be more clear. If we do include that in economic development, that we use language that's clear.
Definitely, yeah. Misunderstandings will affect the outcome of the election. Okay, if there's no further discussion,
I have a suggestion,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor. Before we begin the next agenda item, I'd like to call for a 5-minute recess.
second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. We'll return at 9:55. It's 9:55, so we're back in session. We're ready to go over and review the proposed 2021 budget. So this time, Lacey?
Okay, we will start out with just this summary page. It's page 7 of your binders. This summary shows the revenues and expenditures for all of the budgeted funds. And one item that I would like to point out is that while all budgets are balanced to zero when submitted to the state, this report does not, typically the way that that's done, that does not account for the spend down of unappropriated fund balances within revenues, because basically those, cash spend down is put back up as a revenue item, so it's not easy to see that. So this report does not account for that, so that you can easily see when cash is being spent, if that makes sense. So, for example, on the summary page, if you look at economic development and transportation, it will show you that 2019 actuals, we brought in $55,000 in revenues that we did not spend, so we added $55,000 to our cash balance. And then it shows that the 2020 adopted budget, we budgeted that we could spend up to $219,912 of our cash balance in that fund. and so forth. So does that clarification of what we're looking at make sense to everyone? So for example, in the general fund, the 2021 proposed budget, you can see has a significant decrease in the cash spend from 2019 actuals of over 400,000 to 2020 adopted of over 500,000. What we're actually projecting and proposing in 2021 is closer to $160,000, $180,000 in cash. So the goal is to be much more protective of that cash, decrease projected expenditures, and I was also very conservative on projected revenues as well this year. Any questions on this page, or would you like me to go into more detail on this page, or just continue?
Any questions on the summary page, Commissioners?
I'm good.
Okay.
Good.
I'm good. Thank you, Lacey.
Mayor, are you good as well? Okay. This is an additional summary page that breaks it out again between revenues and expenditures so that it's easier to compare total revenues in budgeted funds against total expenditures, so that you can see overall where we're at. So, for example, if you're looking at water sewer, which is the last item in the revenues comparison, we are the 2020 adjusted. You can see that I have brought down anticipated revenues and budgeted also kind of a decrease in 2021 proposed revenues, and that is due to, we weren't imposing interest and penalties, which is a revenue source. We also have had a lot of delinquent payments and things like that, which will play a part in the 2021 proposed numbers. So this is just a comparison of year-to-year revenues and then separately stating the expenditures. Any questions on this page?
No,
Okay.
I have none.
I have none.
I'm good.
Okay. The next page, page 9, is an overview of the 2021 proposed and 2020 approved mill rate and mill levy. And these amounts I printed this page based off of the option 1 file that you all received, which is keeping the mill rate the same at 55.032 mils, which is a reduction in the levy, or the total dollars that we raise through ad valorem taxes, by about $9,000. So the budget documents that we'll be going over are keeping the mill rate the same, but the levy dollars are going down. And then option 2 that you all received was, and I will say that is by using a 0 delinquency rate. And then option 2, I put in a 0.35 delinquency rate, so a third of a percentage delinquency rate, which is incredibly low. And that raised the levy back up the $9,000 so that we would be collecting the same dollar amount in taxes as we have in the previous 2 years.
On the delinquency rate, is that on ad valorem? Is that what you're considering?
Yes,
Delinquency on ad valorem?
correct.
And the determination of 0.35%, is that what you looked at when we got our property tax payment, or you?
No, I purely put in the rate that would bring us back up to prior year budgeted collections.
Okay. What have you seen, or have you seen any rates that have been projected from the state for delinquency?
The budget documentation that I received from the county, if I recall, had a proposed delinquency rate of like 4%, or 4.85 is ringing a bell, but I would have to go back and confirm. The projections that I've seen and that we've discussed at other meetings over the last years have in reality been closer to 8-9% up to 11%. So we do have a very high delinquency rate.
So how do you compensate for the difference? Is that in our encumbered cash?
That and good planning. We know what our yearly current ad valorem collections are going to be in June. So the second half of the year would have a reduction, hopefully, in expenditures to compensate.
Okay. I might need more information as we go on.
Okay.
But thank you.
This page also shows a comparison of the total assessed value in 2020 versus anticipated for 2021. The bottom two tables show that valuation difference, and our valuation has gone down 0.35%. So that's where I came up with that delinquency rate of 0.35 to bring us back up.
Oh, okay.
Is that number. And the bottom table just shows that in terms of levy dollars. So that's that 0.35% is how you come back up to the $9,108 difference in levied dollars. Any questions on this page?
I'm good, Lacey.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
I'm going to skip down to page 11 now of your file. And this is a summary of transfers. So you'll see things like, these are going to be your big capital projects, your debt funding, and your general fund support. So when we collect revenues through the special use sales tax, for example, and then those funds for the airport projects is what I'm using as an example. They're collected in the special use sales tax, but then they're transferred to an airport project fund to fund those projects. So you will see transfers like that. That's the same with City Hall. Then the next one down is debt service transfers. So this ties back to that bond and interest summary that we looked at previously that shows what's being transferred from water, sewer, special use sales tax, and education sales tax to fund our bond and interest payments. The next item is general fund support, and I am going to jump to this other supporting document to talk about the change that we have made in the basically administrative fee charged back to the general fund. So in 2019 and previous years, it was budgeted $670,000 from water and sewer and $100,000 from sanitation. Last year, we bumped that up in water sewer to $700,000. And this year, I am proposing that we bump that up again to $800,000. The reason for that, honestly, we need to build up our cash in the general fund. We've seen increasing expenses, but we are trying not to raise taxes for those increases in expenses. It is industry standard that, administrative services cost, and an enterprise fund, a business, incurs those administrative expenses, and currently the general fund pays for most of those. So industry standard is that it shouldn't be more than 15% of your revenues in those enterprise funds. So what I have done is, this is a table of revenues for each of those 2 enterprise funds, and I have highlighted in each of the years about what we have been in terms of percentages for that transfer. So you can see that for water and sewer, we were hanging out right around 11.8%, and last year we went up to 13%. This year, the increase would be just under 14, a total of 14.5% of revenues being transferred back to the general fund to support the administrative costs of that fund. And I have left sanitation at the 8.5, so I won't talk about that one too much because there was not a change. So in coming up with this, I will say that I looked at the water sewer fund independently first and covered all needs and expenditures and capital projects and beefed up the repair and maintenance of, for example, water towers and things like that within the water and sewer fund before I considered any sort of transfer to the general fund. So I budgeted everything that we needed and then said, okay, of what is left, what is reasonable, what is within industry standard, and what do we need? So that's how I went through the process of determining what to transfer. Any questions or comments?
Seems rational to me.
Yeah, I prefer the lower number. I know we've discussed the concept and the purpose, but we got to keep it as low as we can. That's why, hope maybe from the special use sales tax we can compensate a little more of the cash, but we're paying the tax one way or another, whether we get it in our mill levy or if it comes across water, sewer, or trash fee. We're still paying one way, probably with an increase. The mill levy is deceiving because of the valuation of everybody's property fluctuates.
Right.
And it's, you can't guarantee that you will not raise people's property tax because that's tied to valuation, and that's beyond our control. But through the rates, we can maybe balance out that. By balancing out everybody contributing the same impact, then that could cut our mill rate down, that even though the property valuation might go up, but if we can offset that with this, it might give some relief.
And we do provide outside city limit services.
Right.
So this is a larger pool than just our tax base paying into these
Right.
fees. And that's kind of the same concept as like a sales tax. You want outside, you want more people to help contribute. So
Right.
that also helps.
So it's kind of a vicious cycle with declining property valuation and just trying to hold the money the same and hold the line the same. It's a struggle.
It is. And my goal with this is to find that balance and to make sure that we're not taking away from any needed water or sewer improvement to do that. But by budgeting and funding that independently and first, we keep that from happening.
And I think maybe that's my basic concern, that if you don't focus on the repairs to keep the system operating and you just look at how much I need and I'm going to take there and neglect the repairs, then you increase your expenses in the operation, that there's got to be a balance. You've got to do the maintenance. You've got to be aware and allow the money to do the repairs of your system, or it's going to come back and cause you more expense, the more infiltration into the sewer system, the more it costs to treat the sewage. So you're operating, the less stormwater coming in, the less volume you're treating, so it's cheaper. So the less water you lose out of your distribution system to leaks, the more efficient your system runs, the cheaper your water is. So it's a big circle that we've got.
It is.
But I understand what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Well, I think I talked to you about this yesterday also, because we're all meeting the needs. It would be one thing if we were just throwing money out and not fixing not only current problems, but making repairs into the future to improve our infrastructure, but we're doing that, and we are allowed to do this. I guess the point of this, what percentage are we going to continue to draw out of this? But even at what we've drawn out, that's still support of, what did I determine yesterday, about 18 mills at $900,000 on that transfer.
Yes.
That being the ballpark. So that gives the people some idea of what support that's bringing. So we're not neglecting what we need to do, but we also need to do this because that cost has to be figured in somewhere and how it's going to be paid. So.
Yes. Any comment, Dean?
It seems rational to me. The best-run organizations I've seen still run in the 11 to 13% of overall cost in administration. And since we don't staff for administration in the enterprise departments, we have to staff for it someplace. We're consolidating all of those transactional type jobs into administration. So it's rational to make this type of withdrawal from the proceeds from the enterprise funds to support the administration side of it. And that not only includes the personnel, but IT needs, printing and postage and all of those things that go into the billing and collecting of the and that's a monthly thing. So you're creating somewhere around 3 times the revenue from these enterprise funds that you are from ad valorem taxation. So, and ad valorem taxes are just a twice yearly transaction. So this is a monthly thing. It takes a lot of transactional support, and it's rational then that we would figure out some way to fairly reconcile the cost. This seems rational to me.
Lisa, I have one other question too. You talked about need to build up cash reserves, and what have you determined as a dollar amount where we would be able to finance 2 to 3 months of operational costs? At one time, we were at one audit. They had indicated that from a previous year, we had a cash balance of like $88,000, and they had said that we probably would need to increase that up considerably to continue to operate into the following year because of the delay of getting our money from the county at that point. So what did you determine would be somewhat adequate range of that cash balance to be?
I mean, I would like to see it stay at least above 800,000. Which we were there last year, but we had significant spend down in cash last year, so we didn't start 2020 out with our best foot forward in terms of cash. Now, we still had 5%, which is what the state recommends is the 5%, but I would like to be more around the 10%.
10%
Of your expenditures.
of annual expenditure?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're right around 8 million. Okay. While we are talking about water sewer, I will mention that, some of the big projects that we have for water and sewer, we've currently got the water treatment plant improvement loan, that we've got multiple projects coming out of that. We also have the Southeast, is it called the Southeast Lift Station loan that has, no, Southeast, I believe, is the one we have, that has different sewer projects. And then we have submitted an application for a third sewer loan that will enable us to do a lot of water line replacement projects and the automated meters. So we have got a lot in the queue in terms of water and sewer projects that should start to go on. And I know we haven't seen necessarily a lot of action over the last year, but we've been getting everything lined up to start these things. It takes quite a bit to build up to actually the doing part. So we're getting ourselves aligned to be able to start those projects here in the near future.
Okay.
And also in water and sewer, I mentioned that maintenance aspect, and one pretty significant change that I did implement in the 2021 budget is previously for water tower maintenance, we had been budgeting maybe $30,000 in maintenance for a year. And I asked Terry, what is the more realistic number? If we were to do a true maintenance program for all of our water towers, what would you need per year? And he told me $135,000 in maintenance costs to actually catch up and have a ongoing program. So that is what I have budgeted. And that is what we plan on getting implemented in 2021, is a true maintenance program for those. Okay. What level of detail do you want me to go over in terms of like the general fund summary and things like that? This next page, which is page 14, has per department revenues and expenditures, and just a comparison of 19 through 20 adopted, adjusted, and 2021 proposed. Do you want me to go over this or skip to maybe capital or personnel?
I don't know, do we have any questions over the general fund summary? I think the only thing I noticed in the 2021 proposal under Building D, the $100,000, that's a lease
Yes.
space. It expires this year.
Yes.
What is negotiations going to renew a lease, or is that?
It's our understanding that they are relocating.
And I did reach out to confirm that, and I haven't heard a response, so I just, oh, they did? And they are, okay.
Okay.
So that does raise a question for me then, and that is that Building D fund looks like it has a total of $414,000 for the year of 2021. What is the breakdown of that? Where is that monies, or what comprises that $414,000?
Sure, let me pull it up. Okay, so here, this would be page 44 of your projected budget worksheet for the general fund. So it's those financial reports. The first set is the general fund, and it's page 44 of that.
I have it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we have one full-time employee in this department, and then it is electric, gas, elevator maintenance, janitorial services, the boiler, exterminating services for the building, and then other building and ground maintenance, cleaning supplies, and other operational supplies. So the bulk of it, over half of it, is for electricity.
I see that.
Does that include the power plant too?
Yes,
Total facility?
yes. And we have been contacted by Evergy of doing a study to reduce our electric expenses in the building, but I believe it was brought up with the commission and chose not to move forward on it in the past. I don't know if that's something you guys want to revisit, but it is an option.
The telephone cost goes to zero.
I have budgeted in a different, probably general government instead of building D.
Same thing with the internet.
Yes.
That makes sense, because
It's not really a building cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, right.
The commodities is lower as well. Where are the commodities going to?
So I believe some of these some of them seem to be more of other building and ground maintenance type of costs that I saw going in here. And I have moved that to other building and ground maintenance. Previously, the budget was 2,800, and I have bumped that up to the 10,000 to compensate. So I've tried to clean up the accounting and a lot of times things are coded to where a budget line item might be remaining when it doesn't represent the true nature of the expenditure. So I'm trying to correct that behavior and budget it appropriately going forward.
Thank you.
I guess a couple of other ones that we may want to look at is the street and traffic within the general fund. And that's starting on page 30, or actually 29 is where it starts. So one thing I'd like to mention with the streets and traffic department, last year I asked the state to review our budget workbook in great detail and asked for their comments on that. And one item that they mentioned was that they had some issue with how we budget streets, and that it is a part of our general fund and not a part of a combined streets and special highway fund, which is, I guess, technically where you should be putting your revenues for gas tax received. We put it in the general fund, and that's frowned upon. So they said if you change a single thing in the next few years, we would like to see a combined street and special highway fund instead of funding this within the general fund. I have asked for some additional guidance, excuse me, and help from them on exactly what the process is and what this would look like. They haven't gotten back with me this year. I did send a follow-up email on Monday. So potentially you will see this streets and traffic department taken out of the general fund and moved into its own standalone fund. But it, I believe, would basically just be extracting it from here and having it as a separate fund.
So in this report, it's in the general fund?
It's in the general fund right
But
now.
you'll have
Excuse me. Also, within streets, I will point out that the specific line items of concrete and asphalt patching have been, the budget amounts have been increased. Previously, we were budgeting maybe around $20,000 in total for those two items, and we've increased it in 2021 to almost $36,000. And that would be for, pothole patching and projects like that.
So when we get the lane mile reimbursement from KDOT, is it going to go in this special street and traffic
Yes.
fund?
Yes. And currently, it's in the federal fund exchange dollars are in the other income reimbursements line. I will have to, I don't remember specifically where the lane miles goes, but I can look that up for you.
What page is that on?
29.
Oh, other income. And it's zero for 2021?
No, it's under reimbursements, so
Oh, okay.
4996. And the reason it's zero in 2018, 19, and the 20 original is I believe most things like that had previously been budgeted in general government or administration, but I have moved it to streets to show
Okay.
specific street revenues paired against street expenditures, in anticipation that I'm going to have to move it.
That's the 178.
Yes, that's the federal fund exchange program.
Okay. Would you elaborate on what that
That,
consists of?
I can't remember exactly how it is calculated, but we receive federal funding for certain types of street projects, and the federal programs have very strict rules and are difficult to administer. So the state of Kansas acknowledges that and has a program that you can participate in called the Federal Fund Exchange, where you can exchange those federal dollars on 90 cents to the dollar for state projects, and the requirements are much less for these state projects, and encompass more roads that you can possibly take care of and things. So we historically have opted to participate in the federal fund exchange, and that amount represents the dollars that we get from the state for our federal dollars.
Changed that a few years ago. It used to be you could build it up and wait and do it like every 3 years when you've got enough projects, because you have to justify it with projects to get it back. And now if you don't apply each year by a certain date, you actually lose those funds. So they have modified
Yes.
that.
At one time, we got $350,000,
Oh, yeah.
$360,000.
They used to let them kind of build up,
Yeah.
and then we would apply for them with all the projects we did during that time period. But now they've changed it. If you don't stay on the ball, you could potentially lose those funds because you have to apply for them every year and apply them to projects that you've completed.
And it has a September due date, September 15th.
Thank you.
Yes. Are there any other departments that you want to look at specifically?
For the Memorial Hall, there were some expenses coming up with curtains, and is that budgeted in the 2021?
The rigging system, I think, was budget 2020, wasn't it? You had 50,000 in there that we haven't done.
Yes.
We prepared the scope of work, but of course, we held off on that project with the whole COVID thing. And I did meet with Mia Walla this week and asked them about doing an ad alternate to take out an additional 5 battens in addition to the 10 we talked about, and looking at this projector system like they did with Les Mis.
Yeah.
And they're gonna go back to the theater people that they work with and their subcommittee on that and get back with me on that.
Okay, good.
So I've budgeted approximately $50,000 yearly for Memorial Hall for those types of building and system expenditures. I am trying to get away from budgeting capital items in the general fund. So it's not reflected in these general fund numbers, but is reflected in the special use sales tax fund numbers. And if we look at the capital improvement, the only things that are budgeted out of the general fund are in that first column labeled general fund. And that's page 23 of your workbooks. So it's, lease payments for the cemetery backhoe, some emergency preparedness equipment, an ambulance, a box truck for fire EMS, computer upgrades, which is out of general government. And then the general fund funds the 5 mil capital reserve fund, so that is in there on page 24. And condemnations, the general fund funds that initiative as well, so that is there. So you can see that the grand total on page 24 is $585,000 of capital type expenditures coming out of the general fund, and all others are budgeted elsewhere.
So small maintenance, you're gonna come out of general fund, but say a boiler replacement or chiller replacement here, you would budget that money in the special use sales tax capital improvement.
So there is some contingency for like a building and grounds maintenance built into the operating budgets. But if it were in excess of those contingencies, it would come from elsewhere, or cash balance if we chose to amend the budget. One large component of the general fund expenditures is going to be personnel driven. So if you would like to go to page 28 of your workbook, we can go over personnel expenditures. So page 21 represents total personnel in terms of people, not dollars. You can see that the comparison from 2020 to 2021, the allocations between full-time, part-time, temporary, and seasonal have quite a bit of fluctuation. And that is purely because last year was my first budget season. So I pulled personnel records and budgeted based off of what the current type of employee was on staff. So if we had If we had that position filled as a express or temporary employee, I budgeted it as a temporary employee. I know better now. And so this is budgeted for all full-time at our fully staffed capacity. So that's going to be your difference in those 4-column breakout. If you look at just the total columns, you'll see that we have added 3 employees in total to the city's staff. And I have a note at the bottom of this page of what the breakout of those increased staffing positions are. So 1 is in the general fund, and it's the addition of 1 code enforcement officer. And then the other 2 are in water sewer, and it's addition of 2 seasonal mowing crew employees. So any questions or comments on that?
I do, I think, and that is, what is the number that I should be looking at for total compensation, inclusive of health insurance, taxation, unemployment expense, those types of things? Where is that one number that rolls up all of personnel costs for 2021?
So if you go down to the next page, page 29, this is a summary of total personnel costs, and it breaks it out into annual salary, FICA, CAPERS, unemployment, health insurance. It has all of that, and then the combined total payroll numbers are on the right-hand side of the page, the 2021 total payroll, and then it compares it against 2020 total payroll and shows an increase or decrease.
I see, so it's a 3rd column from right.
Yes. And it is broken out by fund, and then a total combined dollar amount at the very bottom.
Thank you.
And these numbers are inclusive of changes due to the new retirement program that you approved. Those projections are included in these numbers as well, including health insurance, vacation payouts, sick leave payouts, and things like that.
You would consider that total compensation?
It's included in this total compensation number,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
And the budget is set up based upon merit increases and not cost of living?
So the way that my input spreadsheet is set up, really that heading is misleading. This is applied more as a cost of living increase and not merit, but my numbers weren't, if I put it in the COLA line, the numbers, there's a formula off or something like that. It wasn't coming out correct. So this merit increase, I believe is just represents 1%, maybe 1.5% increase in cost of living increases. It's very, very, very small. And so we're not really budgeting for merit increases this year since with the uncertainty of the economy right now. I did ask all department heads to send me lists of anticipated promotions or milestones reached by their employees, so that things like that weren't missed. If you are due for a promotion or a pay increase based off of that, it is included in this budget, but just a percentage increase is not.
Okay.
That is really the high-level overview of the items. If you would like to talk about some of the other funds, we can. They're mostly capital-driven, which we've talked about at previous meetings, but I'm happy to go over them again if you would like. Oh, one other item I will point out is this summary of external funding. I'm often asked what we provide to external organizations, and this is a breakout of that, and it's on page. I'm not sure what page it's on. Kelly, do you know, did you put that other supporting document file?
I put everything in that you sent me.
At the top, it says summary of external funding. It's not going to be in that first section. It's probably right in front of your financial reports or right after.
Towards the back.
Oh,
Looks like
okay.
this.
Okay.
What
It doesn't
page?
have a page number on it, but it's just right before your street projects and things, it's towards the back.
It's before what?
It's all those street projects and things in the back, it's just a few pages behind that, so. Just towards the very back.
Mine is the fourth page from the end. So I have 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth
Okay.
page from the very back of the folder.
Okay, found it.
Okay, so this summary represents what support services we provide to AWOL, the library, Montgomery County Action Council, Chamber of Commerce, Main Street, the Recreation Commission, including the Ash Youth Center and Riverside Beach, Municipal Band, Historical Museum, and Fort County Mental Health. The waived utilities, I will note that only includes water utilities. Some of these, we may pay for some electrical services as well, and I did not put those in these amounts. And then if you look at the last column, has the account numbers, and that will help you determine where it is funded. So anything that starts with 01 is from the general fund. On the library, Fund 42 is the library fund. Fund 4 is the industrial fund, so that's where Montgomery County Action Council and the chamber dues are funded out of. And then 44 is the special parks and recreation, and 45 is the special alcohol fund. Riverside Beach, the miscellaneous column is more of capital expenditure improvements to the facility, and those are funded out of Fund 67, which is the Quality of Life Sales Tax Fund. So I just wanted to, this is a question that I often get, so I wanted to point out that I did prepare a summary of those types of expenditures for you all.
Which did you say was the 04 fund?
The industrial fund.
Industrial. Where do industrial revenues come from? Where do we get those monies?
Those are, it is a tax levied fund, so we get them from current and delinquent ad valorem tax and motor vehicle tax.
Thank you.
And then there's a very, very small component of interest income. And if we sell any of the land that we own in the industrial park, the receipts of those sales of land would go here as well.
Thank you.
And 44 was,
44 is the Special Parks and Recreation Fund.
Are the special parks and recreation revenues from collections for, like, the rides and things like that?
No, those are receipted in the general fund, because that
That's-
is where the expenditures come out of. The special park and recreation is funded by liquor tax, which is the same for the special alcohol fund. Fund 44 and 45 are funded through the liquor tax collections.
okay.
Do you guys have any other questions, or do you want to look into the other funds or capital projects or anything else? Again, I want to answer all of the questions that you have, but still be respectful of everyone's time, so.
I think, for me, I guess, would be the option 1 and 2. Are you asking us which option to pursue, or are you?
Yes, so I do need to know what, the next step will be to publish the proposed budget for the budget hearing, and I will need to know what option you would like me to post.
Okay, so before we go into that, commissioners, do you have any questions, or do we need to go over anything else concerning the budget before we talk about the option 1 and 2?
I'm good.
Commissioner Ususi?
I'm good, Mayor.
Okay. Lacey, then if you want to go, and we can talk about option 1 and 2 now then.
Sure, let me pull them up. So let me start by saying, I kind of went over this at the beginning of the meeting, but the difference between the two options is either keeping the mill rate the same or the mill levy the same. And the difference is going to be, the mill rate is 55.032 mills, and that raises it raises $2,590,433. If we were to keep the mill levy the same, the total tax dollars raised to fund government operations, that would increase the rate by, it's like 0.19 mils. So it would go from 55.032 to 55.227, and the total levy raised would be $2,599,499. So it's roughly a $9,000 difference. And the detailed budget is completely the same for each of these options. I'm not proposing we increase expenditures to have that same levy dollar amount. The only thing that I changed in these two options is the delinquency rate.
Well, that's kind of a question maybe I have with the delinquency rate. It was based upon the difference in the valuation, but you're saying that delinquency percentage is higher than that. So how have we adjusted a higher percentage of delinquency using reserve funds?
Yes, and I can, let me pull it up and I can tell you, if I were to enter a 4% delinquency rate, what that would do. So that would bring, 4% would bring our total levy up to $2,694,050. And I believe that that is over the level of needing over the level of needing to hold an election. So we can only raise it more or less. It's basically the rate of inflation, which would be $2,655,918. So we would be over that by roughly $40,000. And that 4% increases our levied dollars of just over 100,000 is that difference.
So by just keeping the delinquency at 0.35%, we'll be using cash reserve
Yes.
for the shortfall.
If our expenditures remain the same, yes. The other option is, we're always looking to decrease expenditures and use our monies as, stretch them as far as they can go. It could mean defunding certain capital, some of those capital items that are within the general fund and things like that would be other options.
So you had mentioned earlier in the meeting about a projected delinquency rate of 4.85.
That was the delinquency rate designated on the documents that I got from the county.
From the county, okay.
Yes.
So we could be looking at higher than 4%?
We could.
Theoretically? Or is it potential for that to even be more than that, 4 point? I mean, there's always a potential, but I mean,
Right.
at what point do we realistically plan for this is what we think it'll be, but it could end up being this, so these are the figures we need to consider.
And I need to educate myself on the calculation of this because, and I don't know if I need to contact the county or the state for that, but that delinquency rate, I believe, represents current uncollected ad valorem taxes. They're still due and outstanding, so if they're received in a later year, that increases your monies in your delinquency rate. So I don't know what relationship they show in regards to that percentage. So I don't know if that 4% includes that offsetting increase in projected delinquent taxes. I need to ask for clarification.
On that 4.85% that the state's indicating, is that over past years, is that in line, or is that an increase that they show, or did they indicate that was up and above what the average was over the last 5 years or whatever?
When I pull budget to actual numbers, I presented this at a commission meeting previously. I calculate our delinquency rate as fluctuating between 8 or 9% up to 11%.
Okay.
And so that's part of what I need to clarify with the discrepancies in those two numbers of, I'm sure it's a matter of we're looking at different things.
Okay.
The delinquency rate that you're calculating, that's either 8 to 11%, that's instantaneous and doesn't include late collections from previous years, is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
Worst case scenario.
Yes.
This is if we do nothing
Yes.
and we experience the county's 4%, then our cash account, instead of being impacted by 184,000, roughly 185,000, would be roughly $285,000 out of cash. Because the 4%
The four,
delinquency impact would, if we did not change the rate, would be then absorbed from cash reserves.
correct.
And so I calculated that at $103,000. Is
Yes.
that close?
Yes, so I have $103,617 is that represents that 4%. So if you double it, you're at 8%, you're looking at a $206,000 shortfall in cash or in collections, which would be made up either with a reduction in expenditures or a spending down of cash. And I think that this is partially how, we've gotten into this, the cash position is not keeping a close eye on this and adjusting expenditures for that delinquency rate and or not budgeting a delinquency rate.
Lacey, how much of a percentage can you include in the budget for the delinquency rate and stay under the inflation max?
Um, 2.5%. I mean, you could go slightly above that, but 2.5% would yield 2,655,194, which is just under $65,000 over the that option one of 0% delinquency rate. So that 2.5% represents about $65,000, and that is under the tax lid limit by $724.
Just if you're expecting a higher delinquency this year, it's just something that I think you need that information.
So that would be, that covers the 2.5%, and that would not go to the voters because it's within that, the range of
Right.
the inflation rate. So we could do
Yes.
that without any.
So you have the
qualm
authority to do that.
To do that without any
And
qualms.
be
You do.
within the lid.
The lid.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we have the higher delinquency rate, we've adopted the budget based on one or two, then to compensate for that, you would reduce capital improvement projects, eliminate those? Or how would you,
Can you restate your question? I don't think I understand.
if our revenue or collection of ad valorem taxes is less than what we've projected, then where do you adjust the budget?
Your only options are to reduce expenditures, and so you could cut something, whether it be some operational type expenditure or a capital expenditure or an initiative or a project that is funded, or you spend down cash.
Okay. So the easiest place would be to reduce capital improvement projects.
That's where I would look first,
Yeah.
yes.
And hold on to your cash reserves, which we're trying to build up, so
Right.
it would be easier to look at your capital projects and put them back into the future, or just eliminate for that year, whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Which again, if you're wanting to see which potential projects that would be, you would look at that 2021 capital summary that's on page 23 and 24 of your workbook, and we would be talking about items in that first column, which are general fund, and you would have to exclude the $235,000 from the 5 mills, because that's a transfer to the capital reserve. So you'd be looking at not funding condemnations or computer upgrades or an ambulance or a siren.
So we're looking at basically $9,000 in option 1 and 2 difference to keep the amount. Is our intent to keep the amount we collect the same as in previous years? Would that be the approach?
Yes,
And-
the 3 options would be keep the mill rate the same, keep the mill levy the same, or do something different.
Last year, we collected, what, $2,599,000
Yes.
for,
Well,
So
that's
that's
what we budgeted,
option
yes.
2.
Yes, option 2 keeps the same levy, so the same total dollars.
yeah.
Yes,
That's
I-
what we've done the previous years, the last year or two, the same
Yes.
dollar amount.
yes, the last, this would be the 3rd year in a row that was our levy.
Yeah. I think when the way I'd look at it, and because of the mill tied to valuation, and the only thing we can do is because we can't keep everybody's taxes from going up because we can't control valuation. The only thing we can do is control our spending and how many tax dollars we take. So we either set our goal at a limit and try and stay below that, or we stay below it. We don't go over. So it sounds like either proposal, we're doing that.
Yes, yes.
The mill is kind of a game, really. You take your expenses and your revenue, and the difference is what the mill it becomes. So
Your mill rate is calculated based off of your total valuation. Yes, so the variable that we don't have control over, like you said, is the total assessed valuation.
So is our goal then to still to stay below the rate that we had last year, the dollar amount that we collected last year. Commissioners, what's your
What's your
desire?
desire?
You know, due to everything that's gone on this year, how unpredictable that it's been, I would like to see us keep the dollar amount. I would like to see us hold that to previous, what we had previous. And if we need to make adjustments due to a delinquency rate that's higher than what we built in or projected, then we need to do that accordingly. But I would like to stay with that.
Okay. Commissioner Hayes?
I think I'd like to reinforce that this is an incredibly uncertain time, and that while we may trust these numbers as the best information we have available for this decision at this time, things like delinquency rate could surprise us. Things like actual, proceeds from other types of revenue sources could surprise us. And we should not be surprised, therefore, with some kind of a future discussion about cost control. So as long as we're all ready for the surprises and ready for those types of conversations, and knowing that we're making the best decision with the information, the decision with the best information that we have available today, tomorrow we'll get better information. So, indeed, what the state's recent legislation has told me is that if you do not budget well and stay on top of your expenses and align your taxation rate or levy with those expenses, then you could be caught between a rock and a hard place in the future by not keeping up. So I would agree that option 2, where we maintain the levy, seems the most rational at this point in time, as we do not know what's going to happen, and for us to fall slightly behind the levy means that at some point in time in the future, we could have to have an election just because we can, slipped a little bit each year until the point where we couldn't keep up with our expenses.
Okay, thank you for the direction.
With $9,000 difference between the two, I think the levy, I would agree with that. And because if we're talking a shortfall of greater, we're going to have to cut capital projects.
And I'll continue looking for cost savings and operational costs as I have been doing. So hopefully it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
We're able to reduce our costs in some places.
And I don't know if it would be appropriate to mention the Spark program that would reimburse us some of our actual expenses to COVID.
So the 2020 revised budget that I have in here is not something that we are necessarily adopting, but it's, my goal of what I'm going to try to stick to. It has $200,000 in COVID-related expense reimbursement built in, between, Spark and FEMA and other things, I think that that's a conservative projection. But it is in those 2020 revised numbers.
Okay. That would help,
Yes.
so.
And
for-
I'm still actively looking for other grant opportunities and things like that. So to the extent that we can, pair any, especially with budgeted capital expenditures, if we can pair those with grants to reduce our costs even 25%, that's beneficial as well.
Okay.
I have one that I'm actually just getting ready to submit probably later today. It's only a $50,000 grant, but I only included budgeted like public safety type expenditures, and it would decrease those costs by 35%. So
Okay.
things like that will help.
And the unencumbered amount that you included in the budget was from the auditors working on the 2019?
They are not finished yet, so those are technically unaudited numbers. I did ask them if they had any anticipated journal entries that would significantly impact the budget, if they would share those with me, and they said that they did not have any.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So what I understand with our workshop, our intent today was to go through the proposed budget for 2021 and discuss any questions, any modifications that we felt we had to give you direction to complete it. So if there's no further questions, what we would do is end the meeting, and then you would present the modifications at a commission meeting for us to formally adopt it at that commission meeting. Am I correct?
yes, the next step is by, I believe it's August 3rd, the proposed budget will be published in the paper as a budget hearing, and I will use option 2. At that time, I may also publish an amended budget for the sanitation fund to correct that the purchase of the 2 vehicles from last year, just so that we can talk about it all at the same time. So it will be an amended 2020 budget for sanitation and the proposed 2021 budget. We will discuss it, and then you can adopt it after the public hearing if you choose.
Okay. So then for today,
Oh, and one other thing. The only potential change from what we've talked about today and what's in this packet, as far as, I think I put in a copy of what the budget hearing page would look like. If I hear back from the state on how to correct that the combined street and special highway fund, that may look a little bit different, but our
Okay.
totals will remain the same.
okay. So, commissioners, do we have any further questions for Lacey? Commissioner Hayes?
I do not.
Commissioner Eustace?
I do not.
Okay. So I think we've completed the tasks we've been assigned for today. So with that, in my opinion, we're ready for a motion to adjourn. So with that, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried, meeting adjourned.